Questions for reflection. In our first reading for today's Holy Mass, we hear the story of the Lord once again intervening in the history of the people he had chosen, Israel. Once again, they had turned away from the Lord, but he does not abandon them, even to their own sin. The verse before the excerpt we heard says this, quote, "The sons of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Now, what was the evil they committed? They served the false gods of the Canaanites. They committed idolatry. They abandoned the one true God who had brought them out of Egypt and brought them into the promised land. Then, miraculously, the Lord intervened. His mercy always triumphs. He sent an angel, remember the word means messenger, to Manoah. He touched the wife of Manoah with his grace, and she who was barren bore a great warrior for God's people. She and her son would practice restraint. She by restraining from drinking fermented wine and eating nothing unclean, he in taking the Nazarite vow. This is found in the book of Numbers, chapter 6, verses 1 to 12. It's a special consecration to the Lord, involving refraining from drinking wine and even refraining from cutting one's hair or beard. Now, the son of this miraculous intervention would be named Samson. Manoah offered praise to the Lord and dedicated this son to the Lord. Samson would go on to live an austere life and to begin the eventual deliverance of Israel from the Philistines. But again, even this miraculously conceived man would have feet of clay and succumb to temptation with a woman named Delilah. The true deliverance of Israel would only come when God sent his own son, Jesus. And the Word, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, the one through whom the universe was created, would become incarnate in the womb of a virgin named Mary. As we move through Advent and toward the day when we celebrate his birth, Jesus, the Christ, let us examine the ways in which we engage in our own forms of idolatry, ways in which we do not put the Lord first. Let us prepare ourselves to receive him afresh. Let us renew our promises made at our baptism, to be set apart, to be holy, consecrated to him. As always, the psalmist David leads us in praise today, reminding us that the Lord is our rock, our hope, and that we can rely on him. Do we? What place does our faith have in our daily lives? In the gospel appointed for today's Holy Mass, we hear of the Lord's intervention in the lives of a wonderful older couple, a Jewish priest named Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. They were faithful to the law and the covenant, yet she was barren, unable to bear children. While Zechariah is offering worship in the temple, the Lord sends his messenger, his angel, who says, and I quote, "Zechariah, do not be afraid, for your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth is to bear you a son, and you shall name him John. He will be your joy and delight, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He must drink no wine, no strong drink. Even from his mother's womb he will be filled with the Holy Spirit, and he will bring back many of the Israelites to the Lord their God. With the spirit and power of Elijah, he will go before him to reconcile fathers to their children, and the disobedient to the good sense of the upright, preparing for the Lord a people fit for him." End quote. And Zechariah said this to the angel, "How can I know this? I'm an old man, and my wife is getting on in years." And the angel replied, "I am Gabriel, who stand in God's presence, and I've been sent to speak to you and bring you this good news." Now, it takes Zechariah some time to believe the promise, and there are consequences to that lack of faith. But God's plan unfolds. Elizabeth bears a son, John the Baptizer. We see the analogy with our first reading. The Lord miraculously intervenes. A barren couple receive a child who is to be specially dedicated to God. John lives a similar vow as Samson, refraining from wine and taking on an ascetical life. But John's role is so far greater. He is to be the promised Elijah, the forerunner, pointing Israel toward the one who is to come, the Messiah for which they long, Jesus Christ. And John fulfills this prophetic role with beauty and fidelity, showing each one of us how we are to be heralds, pointing the world toward the coming of Jesus. and he dies a martyr's death. Advent is a season of preparing for the coming of the Lord. Soon, Christmas will be upon us. Are we ready?